Is Frenchman Zaccharie Risacher, who is the odds-on favorite to be the first overall pick.
Almost every team I talk to at this stage has him ranked number one in their internal big board as well. Everybody pretty much has Zaccharie Risacher at number one.
Okay, so at this point, it's kind of common knowledge, but in case you haven't heard, the 2024 NBA draft isn't as good as the 2023 NBA draft. The potential number one pick of this NBA draft, at least as of now, isn't supposed to be the next coming of LeBron James. But that isn't to say that there is a remarkable player in this draft that could change everything for the franchise that takes him. But before we get to the content, we are on the grind to 1 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications to help us reach our goal. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? At this point, several NBA executives went as far as to state that this year's NBA draft is actually the worst that they have ever seen. Now, whether or not this actually turns out to be true or not is of course going to take some time. But if recent history offers us any insight, then the 2013 NBA draft may be a good comparison, being that it is undoubtedly seen as one of the worst in recent history. Sure, you had Giannis Antetokounmpo and Rudy Gobert that came out as middle to late first round picks, but when you take a look at the top draft, it really left little to be desired, especially because the first overall pick was considered to be the greatest draft bust in NBA history. With that being said, there is something that many of these analysts and draft experts seem to be missing in their comparisons, especially regarding the top of the class, and most of that, in my firm opinion, revolves around the projected top pick, Zaccharie Risacher, who, if you haven't seen him play, is actually really good and has a chance to be great. For a draft that is famously being described as being without a player worthy of the number one overall selection, I have to say I'm a little baffled by the disrespect that Risacher gets. This man is a Euro Cup Rising Star award-winning Frenchman that is standing at 6 foot 9 inches with a wingspan of just a shade under 6'10". The 19-year-old wing clearly possesses the length and frame that will fill out nicely given some time and work in the weight room. But what really gets me about the whole thing is that even if his physical development does take some time, he actually possesses the tools that will allow him to step in and become a valuable contributor for a long time beginning from day one, which is why I wouldn't understand why the Atlanta Hawks would blow up their roster if they were to select Risacher. His skill set is the skill set that each team in the NBA can use, built in the mold of one of those players that looked up to Paul George growing up. As we all know, in the modern era, players that can shoot from the three and play solid defense will more often than not find their way onto the court. These are the two skills that Risacher not only already has in his bag, but has in abundance. He's an adaptable defender that can guard the 2 through the 4, has the ability to shoot very well off of the catch with a devastatingly quick release, and is known for possessing a solid basketball IQ. It's almost as if Risacher could serve the 3-and-D role for a team while simultaneously developing into a star wing. This makes him a bit of a rare breed, sort of like having a pre-packaged sniper rifle that could one day sprout wings and grow into a beautiful little rocket launcher. Flipped into this context, this makes his ceiling extraordinarily high, considering that at his very worst he'll become a lengthy 3-and-D specialist, and at his very best could become a perennial all-star that not only has those skills, but also learns how to take advantage of his ability to be more consistent as a playmaker, which, truth be told, he's already kind of begun showing signs of. With most of the talk of the draft surrounding who the Hawks could take with the first pick, most boards have it being a choice between Risacher and his fellow Frenchman, center Alexandre Sarr, and the debate between the two comes down to what the Atlanta Hawks are looking for. Now, why would you select Risacher over Sarr? Well, NBA draft analyst Jonathan Givony stated just earlier this week on ESPN that Risacher is not only at the top of most analysts' boards, but has been for quite some time.
We've had Zaccharie Risacher number one on our board pretty much the entire season, so that would not be a surprise to me. Most NBA teams consider him the best prospect in this draft. Almost every team I talk to at this stage has him ranked number one in their internal big board as well.
As stated before, a lot of this has to do with his shooting, and what's not to like about it? The kid has shot 40.7% from beyond the arc throughout his 3-year career as a pro so far, as well as 53% from the field as a whole. But his rise could also have to do with his self-awareness and humility regarding his weaknesses as well, such as his ball handling through contact and his ability to create shots for himself. This seeming willingness to improve is something that the Hawks could be taken to heart. In a recent interview that Risacher had with with the media, he literally came out and acknowledged his weaknesses himself, saying the part of my game that I need to work on is probably my dribbling ability, the way to handle contact with dribbling, but I know I can do it. I will say that's the next step. When you compare this to Alex Sarr, who despite scoring under 10 points per game this last season in Australia of all places, while somehow just averaging just above 4 rebounds despite his height and shooting under 30% from 3, Sarr is making audacious political moves to not get drafted by Atlanta. To me, this speaks volumes about the differences in their personalities, maybe being one of the key reasons that Risacher could not only have overtaken the big man as the top pick, but could also probably be a reason that when we look back at the two in years to come, we realize that Risacher's mindset is a large part of what separated them. Plus, when put into further context, with the Hawks likely entering the 2024 season without at least one of Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, it's pretty obvious that Risacher could be the perfect complement to whichever guard is kept. Being that one of Risacher's greatest strengths is that, unlike the two guards mentioned, he doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands to help put points on the board. Despite being only 19 years old, Risacher has already made a name for himself for being fabulous off of the ball. He has a natural knack for cutting and finding open space on the perimeter, which is a skill that's getting more important by the year. The same can't be said for Alexandre Sarr, who, though his defensive abilities are there, he just doesn't have the same type of versatility. For a guy that's over 7 feet tall, his post game is somewhat limited, and with his dribbling also being a major question, his entire offensive repertoire is somewhat restricted. He's nowhere near the shooter that Risacher is, and when coupled with his lack of separation abilities, his somewhat strange shooting motion, and awkward footwork at times, the differences between the two begins to become even clearer. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that at 224 pounds, it's also likely he'll get bodied in the paint by stronger opponents. Now you might say,
Mike, what about Chet Holmgren or Victor Wembanyama? They're both thin as hell.
to which I say hold your horses, because until Alexandre Sarr shows the ability to shoot the ball like that or move off of the dribble, then that's not even a conversation I'm even willing to entertain. With all of this in mind, it's no wonder that the team Sarr has most often been connected to outside of Atlanta, the Washington Wizards, have also begun questioning his long-term potential. As we can see, it doesn't take a lot of research or tape study to see that in the shallow pool of talent in this year's draft, Risacher is pretty much undoubtedly the best prospect. He has the versatility to fit into pretty much any scheme, but even from a mere talent standpoint, he's got the most to offer. Some analysts have taken their belief in his defense to the next level, even raving about it as one of the best aspects of his game. The only real big question at this point with him is if he'll be able to develop a one-on-one game and become the focal point of a team's offense with the ball in his hands. If he can do that, which will likely happen by merely putting on more muscle to shrug defenders off, then there is no telling what his ceiling could be. I wouldn't be surprised if he not only becomes a top 5 or 10 wing defender in the years to come, but also an all-star offensively, and the type of guy that we could find competing for the three-point title a few times. In a perfect world, regardless of his ableness to play anywhere, he would wind up with a team like the San Antonio Spurs. But with Greg Popovich and company not picking until 4th overall, it's likely not a possibility unless a trade were to be made, which at this point seems possible but not likely. The Hawks believe that sending the number 1 overall pick in return for the Spurs' number 4 and 8 overall picks is still somehow giving up too much. My assumption is because there's a gigantic drop-off in terms of the level of talent you could get at number 1 and number 4 and number 8 in this year's NBA draft. It would have been cool to see him team up with Wemby, especially considering that the two have played with each other before, but if anything, this should validate the Hawks even more. When we covered the NFL draft on microphone, multiple teams were trying to trade up to the number 3 overall pick with the New England Patriots to select Drake May. The fact that respected offensive minds were trying so hard to get that number 3 pick to select Drake May already validated the Patriots even more that they should stay pat and select the quarterback at number 3. And if the Spurs are recognizing him as a great player, then chances are the Hawks should stand pat and select him number 1. I mean, considering that the Spurs have a great track record with picks, selecting Manu Ginobili in the 2nd round of the 99 draft, Tony Parker with the 28th pick in the 2001 NBA draft. Technically, they selected Goran Dragic with the 45th overall pick, Derek White at 29, DeJounte Murray with 29 in 2016, or traded George Hill for Kawhi Leonard. Look, I'm not saying that the Spurs are incredible when it comes to drafting. Okay, maybe I am, but if they're this interested in Risacher, chances are that you should stand pat and select Risacher. Doesn't mean he's automatically going to be a Hall of Famer or anything like that. No, of course not. What I am saying is that he is the exact type of player that people may end up looking back on in years to come and wonder how they missed all the signs that were there, such as the fabulous stretch he had this last season from November 11th to December 28th, where he scored 104 points in 182 minutes. If he were to replicate this solid sample size at almost 2 months at even just a clip of 25 minutes per game, we could see him score 14 points per game as a rookie. He shoots the lights out, is almost 6'10", plays both sides of the floor, and has shown flashes of brilliance. But the thing is, even if he doesn't pan out as an all-star, with the state of the upcoming draft and its apparent lack of talent, he's still obviously the best player right now. No matter if it's with the Hawks, the Spurs, or another team altogether, Zaccharie Risacher has experience leading a winning team. He's helped his club reach the finals for the first time in their team's history this past season, which he did while also leading the entire league in regular season three-point percentage at a ridiculous mark of 56.1%, all while managing almost 4 rebounds per game, despite averaging under 24 minutes, an average that would surely go up playing the fast-paced style of the NBA. If none of the previously mentioned has sold you on him, then perhaps knowing that he is the type of player that comes to play in big games should, as evidenced by some of his most recent playoff performances, where his rebounding improvement took him within striking distance of double-double territory on a nightly basis. With the NBA draft year, you can keep sleeping on him if you want, but in my opinion, Zaccharie Risacher is the best prospect in this year's NBA draft. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree. Besides that, a huge trade was already made in the NBA, and no, we're not talking about Josh Giddey. No Giddey over here. We're talking about Mikal Bridges getting traded to the New York Knicks, and now the Houston Rockets are trying to load up in order to trade for Kevin Durant. It's absolutely insane. We dropped it at 1 a.m. last night. I'll leave a link to it in the end screen if you missed it, and I'll catch you guys there. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.